Bridget, you're a nationally recognized expert in the area of special needs planning. Can you tell me more about what a special needs trust is and why someone might need to have one?
Happy to do so, Susan. So, a special needs trust is often recognized as a vehicle or an arrangement that would be put in place for an individual who has a disability and would be the beneficiary of that arrangement. And that individual would probably be eligible for various governmental assistance programs that are sensitive to what income and assets the individual has. So a special needs trust, because that is the vehicle that'll hold those assets or that income for the beneficiary, is not considered to be available to that individual, which allows them to remain eligible for governmental assistance programs that are based on financial need while having those assets in place to supplement or provide for what those programs do not.
Okay, and who would be setting that up for someone who has that kind of a need?
That's a very good question. That really goes to there are some distinct differences in the world of special needs trusts. People refer to that as one type of arrangement, but there really are two that fall into different categories. One would be a special needs trust that we refer to as first party. And what that means is the individual who is going to be the beneficiary has assets of his own or her own, an income of his own or her own that are going to fund that arrangement. And so that beneficiary either establishes the arrangement for themselves or does so through another party. That's a first party special needs trust. Whereas a third party special needs trust, which is more common, is one that maybe a family member is going to put in place, such as a parent for a child who has a disability, in contemplation of what's going to happen when they're gone and wanting to provide for them beyond their lifetime.
Okay, so some of the key benefits of having a special needs trust would include that there's somebody else available who can help manage the assets, and there's perhaps somebody that's not a family member who might be involved. Why might that be important?
Right. So when you have a trust of any kind, you need to have a manager of that trust, a trustee. And so you can select a layperson, a family member, to be in that role, or you can select a professional, such as a corporate trustee. And why you might want a professional, such as a corporate trustee, to be a trustee, particularly of a special needs trust, is because it's very complicated to manage and administer. It's not just about managing the assets. What I mean by that, it's not just about how they're invested. It's not just about the tax reporting or the accounting. All of that in and of them itself can be overwhelming.
Sure.
But aside from that, you have governmental assistance programs that you have to be mindful of and sensitive to in terms of the do's and don'ts. What are the rules or regulations regarding limits and parameters to make funds available, and how can you make funds available in such a way that the individual has the benefit of those funds, but their benefits remain intact? So I think a professional, such as a corporate trustee who has that knowledge and experience, brings a lot of value to the relationship, and a corporate trustee that recognizes the role that the individual support system plays and is willing to work with them. It's really a team effort. So the corporate trustee manages the assets, makes funds available, but they don't know that beneficiary like the beneficiary knows themselves or a loved one would know them and what their needs are. So being able to work with that support system and also identify resources that might enhance the relationship and bring more quality of life to the individual, such as engaging a private case manager that might be able to come in and do an assessment and make suggestions about needs and wants.
I had a conversation with an attorney who does special needs trust planning, and she said she would never serve as a trustee for a family member that she had who lives with special needs, lives with a disability. Why would she say something like that?
Well, I think professionals that do this type of planning, special needs planning or trust work, recognize that it's a challenge to administer and it's very complicated, but also there can be a lot of other dynamics at play where the family member or loved one wants to be a step removed and not be the person that has to say yes or no, and they're really wanting to maintain the relationship that they have with that loved one and serve other roles, like as an advocate. Maybe they're dealing with the day-to-day care needs of the individual, and that's a lot to have on your plate, but it also they may want that to be their primary and sole focus and not having to add to their plate by managing the trust itself.
We've had a couple of people come to us recently that felt like they had sufficient assets to support a family member that had special needs, but you provided some counsel to them that caused them to adjust course and recognize that there are things that could happen that we don't foresee. Can you comment a little bit more about that?
Well, everybody hopes they have enough to provide for their loved ones. It's even more challenging when you have someone with a disability who may have some level of dependence on others and forever have that level of dependence. And the landscape of governmental assistance programs is forever changing, and you never know at what point in time whether eligibility requirements will change or the services that are available or provided will change. A good example is many of us have heard in the national news that we have a caregiver shortage. Well, that has implications for these very individuals who are disabled and rely on caregivers. During lifetime, they may be relying on mom or dad or a sibling, but at some point in time, they may have to tap into another system to provide that care to them, and it could be cost prohibitive in that circumstance. So you want to set up an arrangement that provides flexibility and allows for them to take advantage of those resources at any point in time in the future if it becomes necessary.
This area of trust planning is very specialized also, and there are not many financial institutions that will serve as a corporate trustee for a special needs trust. Can you comment on why that's the case and why are we willing to do that?
That's very true, and there are very few corporate trustees that are willing to take on a trusteeship involving a special needs trust. And I think it's because of the recognition that it's complicated and you have to have a solid knowledge base and experience in administering those arrangements. And you also have to be comfortable with working with the beneficiaries themselves and who comes with them. They don't come to you alone or in isolation. They have a team, whether it's family members or other professionals or the governmental assistance program itself. So there has to be a comfort level in interfacing with everybody that's involved in the care of that individual. So I respect the institutions that recognize that that's not their skill set. We are willing here at Mission Trust to undertake that relationship because we do have that skill set and we do have that willingness, and we feel like we bring value to the relationship and are able and willing to work with individuals, and we also know the parameters within which we are working.
I think in addition to that specialized knowledge that we have and the willingness to do it, we also have the heart for it.
Absolutely.
Which I think is one of the most important things that we bring to the table. One other thing that I wanted to come back to is the situation where somebody doesn't really know what's going to happen in the future, especially on let's say a first party special needs trust situation. Maybe somebody was in an accident and there's a substantial settlement that really should provide for that individual well into their life, right? Perhaps for the rest of their life. There are other benefits as well, including protecting the assets, correct?
With the arrangement, the trust arrangement, yes. So when somebody has been injured as a result of medical malpractice or an accident, and they are disabled and will be permanently disabled, there is the opportunity to consider what's the best arrangement for them now and in the future. And so whether it's a discretionary type of trust that can become a special needs trust or a special needs trust at the outset, it affords that individual much needed protection, again, management and ability to oversee the estate and provide for that individual's needs. And if at any point in time, if they're not already eligible for governmental assistance, they would be able then to later avail themselves of those benefits. If the trustee is aware of what the circumstances are that might give rise to that need at any point in time.
Okay. As part of that, people have to name someone other than themselves as a trustee, correct?
That's absolutely
And
correct.
that's a really important part of maintaining eligibility for benefits. Can you comment on that a little bit more?
Yes, with regards to any type of special needs trust, whether it's first party or third party, that beneficiary cannot be their own trustee. They cannot be the manager of those assets themselves. And that control that they would have if they were trustee would mean that the governmental assistance programs considers them as having access to those assets, and they would be counted as available and would disqualify them financially from benefits. So they don't have that option. They do have to identify a third party to be a trustee of that arrangement.
Okay. I'd like to close with something that you mentioned earlier, which is the importance of having a team around someone. We've talked about the idea that we're part of the team that helps cradle someone, helps support them in a positive way, and that vulnerable adults, in order to care for a vulnerable adult, it takes lots of people to do it well and do it, especially over a very long period of time. Can you just tie that all back together? Who else might be involved in this process?
Sure, happy to do so. And just keep in mind that we're also talking about a population that begins in infancy on up to an aging adult. Anywhere along the way, that individual could suffer from a disability. And so part of that team necessarily is that beneficiary themselves. And when they're an adult, if they're capable or competent, they play an integral role in the team. And if not, then we are looking to who can support that person and is able to speak or act on that individual's behalf. And that might be a family member. It might be, as an adult, a legal guardian who could also be that family member. And oftentimes they've been in the thick of it, so they have been navigating these systems for many years, but with few resources. So what we bring to the table are the resources that are going to supplement, and also ability to identify other professionals that might be helpful. As I mentioned earlier, private case manager that can open their eyes to what other services might enhance that individual's quality of life, or even meet their needs that the benefit program is unable to do. So, and they've been accustomed to living with that in that way. And then there are certainly other professionals like attorneys that might be involved on the front end with the planning, or along the way if there are challenges in interfacing with the agencies that it's beyond the scope of what we as a trustee are able to address. But I think that what we're able to do is say, this is who we are. We are integral part of the team, as you have said, Susan, but we think there are other players that belong on this team that can really bring value to the relationship and enhance that individual's life.